He paced, calculating. Leave the VIP. We sweep the floor. Two-man teams. Check every room, every ceiling tile. Shoot anything that moves. Sarah had anticipated the frequency change. She couldn't hear their comms anymore. She didn't need to. She knew their doctrine. When an element loses contact with scouts, they consolidate, then search in pairs. She made her way to the hospital pharmacy on the 3rd floor. The door was locked with a keypad, but the power outage had triggered the magnetic fail-safes. She slipped inside. She didn't go for the narcotics. She went for the chemical compounds. As a nurse, she knew exactly what saved lives. As a former Marine, she knew exactly how those same chemicals could be weaponized. She grabbed high-concentration rubbing alcohol, instant cold packs, ammonium nitrate, and aluminum foil. Working with the rapid, practiced hands of someone who had built field-expedient devices in the deserts of Afghanistan, she began crafting flashbangs and smoke generators. She paused. In the reflective glass of the medicine cabinet, she caught a glimpse of herself. Her eyes, usually soft, averted, were locked onto their own reflection. Predatory. The transformation was complete. The quiet nurse was gone. The sniper was back in the hide, and she had an entire hospital full of targets. Heavy footsteps echoed from the stairwell. 2 pairs, coming down to the 3rd floor. Sarah grabbed her improvised devices, the suppressed Glock, and melted into the shadows, moving toward the intersection where the hunters were about to become the hunted. The 3rd floor pediatric wing was a ghost town. Cartoon-painted walls glowing sickly amber. At the far end of the corridor, 2 mercenaries, Jax and a towering ex-ranger named Wyatt, advanced in textbook formation. High-low stack, boots landing on the soft edges of the linoleum to muffle their footfalls. Seasoned operators, Fallujah veterans, private military contractors who had worked for Academy and Constellis before chasing higher paychecks in the black market. They expected resistance. An off-duty cop, maybe. They did not expect to walk into a sniper's hide. Sarah had chosen room 310 specifically for its geometry. The door sat at a sharp right angle from the main corridor, a classic fatal funnel. Anyone entering had to commit their entire body to the doorway before their rifle barrel could clear the frame. She had spent the last 4 minutes preparing the battle space. Using her medical shears, she had severed the tubing of 3 massive green D-cylinder oxygen tanks, opening their valves to a steady hiss. The room was now supersaturated with pure medical-grade oxygen. She stood outside, pressed flat against the wall in the adjacent hallway, holding the heavy spark-striking flint from a medical welding cart. Stacking up. Room 310. Doors cracked. Wyatt's voice, barely a whisper. His boot kicked the door fully open. He swept his rifle into the room. The air inside felt heavy, cold, smelled faintly metallic, empty. He stepped inside, but I hear a hiss. Gas leak? Sarah didn't hesitate. She struck the flint hard against the steel crash cart. A shower of bright orange sparks rained down, and the super-oxygenated air rolling from the room caught the ignition. Science and violence collided in a fraction of a second. Oxygen doesn't burn, but it violently accelerates combustion. The sparks ignited the ambient dust and nearby curtain fabric, and fed by the massive influx of pure O2, the tiny flame erupted into a blinding, concussive flash fire. A roaring wall of blue and yellow heat blew outward through the doorway. Wyatt screamed as the flash consumed the oxygen around him, singeing his gear and blinding him instantly. The concussive wave threw Jax backward into the opposite wall, his rifle clattering to the floor. Before the flames even fully dissipated, Sarah moved. She pivoted around the doorframe, a shadow cutting through smoke. She lunged at the disoriented Jax, who was coughing violently, pawing at his burning eyes. Her knee drove into his sternum, pinning him down, and she plunged a heavy syringe directly into the carotid artery on the side of his neck. Not poison. Vecuronium, a surgical paralytic used to immobilize patients before intubation. Jax's eyes went wide with sudden absolute terror as the drug flooded his system. Within 3 seconds, every limb went slack. His jaw locked. He was perfectly conscious, able to see and feel everything, but completely trapped inside his own paralyzed body. Wyatt was still on his knees in the doorway, batting at smoldering fabric. Sarah stepped up behind him and struck him at the base of the skull with the steel oxygen wrench. Wyatt collapsed, breathing steadily. She dragged both men into the pediatric room, shut the door, and stripped Jax of his tactical rig. Spare magazines, a Benchmade folder, and a customized Mark 18 carbine fitted with a Vortex Optics LPVO scope. It felt familiar in her hands. It felt like home, but it was what she found in Jax's chest pocket that brought her blood to a freezing halt. A ruggedized, encrypted satellite phone, screen illuminated, an open text thread. VIP package secure. Target is cooperative. Feds neutralized. Awaiting extraction on roof in 20 mics. Clean the house. Leave no witnesses. Sarah read it twice. Target is cooperative. Arthur Pendleton wasn't a hostage. He was the client. The defense contractor couldn't refuse the congressional subpoena without admitting guilt. He couldn't testify without implicating himself and his powerful associates. So he hired Corliss's rogue PMC unit to fake a kidnapping and murdered the FBI agents guarding him to make it look like a botched hit. And now, to ensure no one realized Pendleton had walked out willingly, Corliss was going to execute every single member of the medical staff. The cafeteria was going to become a slaughterhouse. Dr. Eris, Clara, all of them. Sarah looked down at the paralyzed mercenary at her feet. The quiet, subdued nurse who averted her eyes in the break room died right there on the linoleum. She slung the Mark 18 over her shoulder, checked the chamber, and racked the bolt. "Time to go to work," she whispered. The fourth-floor interior balcony overlooked the hospital's expansive atrium. Below, the cafeteria's glass walls offered a clear view of the hostages. Sarah low-crawled across the cold tile, staying entirely in the shadows. The emergency generator sputtered, casting nightmarish, flickering silhouettes across the massive hall. She reached the edge, a concrete half-wall topped with a heavy oak railing, 85 yards from the cafeteria's floor-to-ceiling windows. For a Marine sniper trained to hit moving targets at 1,000 yards in the crosswinds of a desert valley, 85 yards was a chip shot. But she was shooting downward at a 45-degree angle through heavy, double-paned acoustic glass, which would predictably deflect the 5.56-millimeter round. She bundled her dark undershirt with 2 thick hospital blankets, crafting a makeshift sandbag on the ledge. She settled the Mark 18 onto the blankets, pressing the stock firmly into the pocket of her bare shoulder, and peered through the vortex scope, dialing magnification to 4 times. The red chevron reticles sharpened in the darkness. Inside the cafeteria, the situation had deteriorated. Arthur Pendleton was not strapped to a hospital bed. He was fully dressed in a tailored suit, gripping a sleek leather briefcase. Corliss stood beside him, nodded once, then turned to his 4 remaining mercenaries and made a sharp, horizontal motion across his throat. "Leave no witnesses." The mercenaries raised their rifles toward the huddled medical staff. Dr. Eris stood up. He stepped in front of Nurse Clara, hands raised in a futile plea. A mercenary shoved his rifle barrel directly into the doctor's chest. Up on the balcony, the world slowed down. The storm outside faded to absolute silence. Sarah entered the bubble. Her heart rate plummeted. Her breathing became slow, rhythmic, perfectly measured. Inhale. She laid the reticle over center mass on the mercenary threatening Dr. Eris. Adjusted 3 inches low and 2 inches right to compensate for the glass deflection. Exhale. She paused at the natural respiratory pause, that fleeting moment of absolute stillness when the lungs are empty. Squeeze. The suppressed Mark 18 coughed a sharp metallic thwack. The heavy glass below shattered into a spiderweb of cracks. The mercenary standing over Dr. Eris dropped like a puppet with cut strings. A clean hole punched through his plate carrier. Panic erupted. Hostages screamed, dropping flat. Mercenaries scrambled, desperately searching for the shooter. "Sniper!" Elevated position. Corliss roared, diving behind a stainless steel serving counter. Sarah was already cycling to her next target. She didn't rush. Smooth as fast. Target 2, a merc, sprinting for the kitchen doors. Track, lead, squeeze. He stumbled mid-stride, his leg buckling as the round shattered his femur. Target 3, sweeping his rifle up toward the balcony, offhand and off balance. Sarah was fully supported and completely static. Squeeze. He collapsed backward over a plastic table. Corliss was pinned behind the counter, his extraction plan in ruins. Pendleton cowered near the exit, face white with genuine terror. Corliss grabbed his radio. "All units converge on the cafeteria. I need suppressing fire." Static answered him. "They can't hear you, David." Her voice came through the cafeteria PA system, cold and even. She had patched her stolen comms into the hospital's paging network. "Miller, Ryan, Jackson, and Wyatt are out. Your perimeter is gone. Drop your weapons." Corliss gritted his teeth. He peeked over the steel counter, spotted the glint of the optic on the 4th floor, and raised his rifle to lay down covering fire. A sniper only needs a fraction of an inch. As Corliss's right shoulder crested the counter, Sarah, who had pre-aimed at the exact edge of the steel, squeezed the trigger. The round took him precisely in the right shoulder, shattering his clavicle. His arm went instantly dead. His rifle clattered uselessly to the floor. The kinetic shock drained the last of the fight from him. Witnessing the carnage, Arthur Pendleton bolted for the stairwell. Sarah tracked him through the scope. She could have ended the corrupt billionaire right there. But she was a nurse. She neutralized threats. She didn't execute fleeing men. She lowered the rifle. In the distance, the wail of police sirens finally cut through the storm. Sarah engaged the safety on the Mark 18, detached the magazine, and cleared the chamber. She placed the weapon neatly on the folded blankets. Standing up, she walked back to the locker room. She pulled a fresh teal scrub top over her head, tied her hair back into its messy bun, slipped her rubber-soled clogs on. By the time heavily armed SWAT officers stormed the cafeteria, they found the mercenaries neutralized and every single hostage unharmed. 10 minutes later, the atrium flooded with police and paramedics. Dr. Eris sat on an ambulance bumper, telling a detective about the ghost that had saved them. Nearby, Sarah Jenkins sat quietly on a gurney. A paramedic checked her blood pressure. "You're doing great, hun." the paramedic said softly. Your pulse is practically resting. You must have nerves of steel. Sarah offered a timid smile, wrapping her arms around herself. I was just so scared, she whispered, looking down at her perfectly steady hands. She stared out into the rainy Seattle night. The ledger balanced once again. The shadows of St. Jude Memorial hide more than just the night shift. When 12 heavily armed mercenaries locked down St. Jude Memorial, they accounted for the security cameras, the police response time, and the VIP target on the 4th floor. But they made one fatal miscalculation. They didn't run a background check on the quiet night shift nurse in the ICU. The relentless Seattle rain hammered against the reinforced glass of St. Jude Memorial Hospital, smearing the city lights into blurred streaks of neon. It was 2:15 a.m. on a Tuesday, the kind of graveyard shift where the silence in the ICU felt heavier than the hum of the life support machines. Sarah Jenkins adjusted her teal scrubs, her fingers deftly checking the IV drip of a comatose patient in room 412. She was 32, dark hair in a perpetual messy bun, eyes the color of faded denim that rarely held anyone's gaze for long. To the rest of the staff, Sarah was just the quiet one. She covered shifts nobody wanted, ate her turkey sandwiches alone in the break room, and never joined the post-shift drinks at the local pub. Dr. Thomas Aris, the attending physician, often joked that Sarah had ice water in her veins. She never panicked during a cardiac arrest. He had no idea how right he was. Beneath the baggy fabric of her scrubs, hidden on her left shoulder blade, was a faded tattoo, the eagle, globe, and anchor. 8 years ago, Staff Sergeant Sarah Jenkins was attached to a scout sniper platoon in the United States Marine Corps, deployed to the unforgiving dust of Helmand Province. She had spent days motionless in blown-out buildings, controlling her breathing, calculating windage, watching high-value targets through the scope of an M40A5 rifle. She was honorably discharged after a catastrophic IED blast took out half her squad. She traded her rifle for a stethoscope, desperately trying to save lives to balance the ledger of the ones she had taken. Tonight, the ledger was about to be reopened. The disruption began, not with a bang, but with darkness. The hospital's power grid failed. A heartbeat later, the backup generators kicked in, bathing the corridors in a dim, eerie amber glow. Generator test? Nurse Clara Higgins asked, stepping out of the medication room, a vial of insulin trembling in her hand. No, Sarah said. Her voice was flat. Her posture had shifted. The slight slump of her shoulders vanished, replaced by a rigid, predatory stillness. She tilted her head, listening. The backup alarms didn't chime. Someone cut the main line from the outside. Before Clara could respond, the elevator doors at the end of the hall slid open. 4 men stepped out. They weren't wearing ski masks or ragged street clothes. They moved with terrifying, synchronized precision. Matte black tactical gear, level 4 plate carriers, drop-leg holsters. They carried suppressed Mark 18 carbines. This was a professional hit squad. Nobody moves. Hands where I can see them, barked the lead man, sweeping his rifle across the nurse's station. His name was David Corliss, a former Tier 1 operator turned rogue contractor for a shadowy private military company. Their target was in room 418, Arthur Pendleton, a high-ranking defense contractor scheduled to testify before a congressional committee the following morning about a multi-billion-dollar black book weapons smuggling ring. Pendleton had survived a poisoning attempt 2 days prior, hence his stay in the ICU under FBI protection. The 2 FBI agents guarding his door reacted fast. The mercenaries were faster. 3 suppressed shots coughed in rapid succession. Both agents crumpled to the linoleum floor, their blood pooling dark and slick under the amber emergency lights. Clara screamed. Dr. Aris froze in the hallway, his chart dropping from his hands. Secure the perimeter. Jam all cellular frequencies, Corliss ordered, his voice calm, devoid of adrenaline. Round up the staff. Put them in the cafeteria on the 2nd floor. Anyone resists, put them down. Sarah was in room 412, standing in the shadows just out of sight of the hallway. Through the narrow window of the door, she watched the tactical takeover unfold. Her civilian brain, the nurse who spent hours holding the hands of dying patients, screamed in terror. But that part of her mind was suddenly, violently pushed aside. The box opened. It was the psychological vault where she kept the Marine. The lock clicked back. Her heart rate, which should have been hammering at 150 beats per minute, dropped steadily, settling into a rhythmic icy 60. Assess. Adapt. Overcome. She scanned the room. No exits except the main door. A 3-story drop from the reinforced window. She was unarmed. A mercenary stepped into the doorway of room 412. Broad-shouldered, scarred jaw, carbine raised. Out here. Now, he commanded, sweeping the barrel toward her. Sarah raised her hands, eyes going wide, playing the terrified civilian perfectly. Please, she stammered, her voice trembling. I'm just a nurse. Move it. He stepped into the room, reaching out to grab her arm. He broke the fatal rule of close-quarters combat. He stepped into his opponent's space without neutralizing their center of gravity. As his hand clamped onto her bicep, Sarah moved. It was a blur of calculated kinetic violence. She didn't pull away. She stepped into him. Her left palm drove ferociously into the underside of his chin, snapping his head back. Simultaneously, her right hand seized the heavy oxygen tank wrench from the patient's bedside table. With ruthless efficiency, she brought the steel wrench down on the nerve cluster at the side of his neck. The mercenary's eyes rolled back. His knees buckled. Before his rifle could clatter to the floor and alert the others, Sarah caught the weapon by its sling. She guided his unconscious body silently to the ground behind the hospital bed. She stood still for 3 seconds, listening. No shots, no rushing footsteps, just the sound of crying hostages being herded toward the stairwell. Sarah knelt. She stripped him of his comms earpiece and fitted it into her own ear. She took his combat knife, a beautifully balanced K-bar, and slid it into the waistband of her scrubs. Then she picked up his sidearm, a suppressed Glock 19. She checked the chamber. Loaded. She left the carbine. Too long, too bulky for tight hospital corners. A sniper knows that mobility and stealth in a confined space are worth more than heavy firepower. A voice crackled in her ear. Bravo 2, sit rep on the north wing. Corliss. Sarah stayed completely silent. Bravo 2, respond. Miller, do you copy? She looked down at the man on the floor. Miller. She keyed the mic on his chest rig twice. Click, click. Standard tactical signal. Acknowledged, cannot speak. Copy that, Miller. Finish your sweep and rally at the VIP suite. Sarah let out a slow, controlled breath. The hospital was a labyrinth of maintenance shafts, laundry chutes, and sterile corridors. It was her terrain now. The mercenaries had seized the hospital. But they were about to find out they were locked inside with a ghost. The second-floor cafeteria was a scene of muted terror. 20 hospital staff members, including Dr. Aris and Nurse Higgins, were huddled on the floor between overturned plastic tables. 4 mercenaries stood guard at the exits, rifles at low ready. Up on the 4th floor, Corliss stood over Arthur Pendleton's hospital bed. The defense contractor was pale, sweating through his gown, tubes running in and out of his arms. Mr. Pendleton, Corliss said, casually checking his watch. My employers are very disappointed in your sudden attack of conscience. They've asked me to ensure you don't make your morning appointment in Washington. You can't do this, Pendleton wheezed, eyes darting to the dead agents in the hall. The National Guard, they'll be here. In this storm? With local police frequencies jammed and dispatchers receiving looped all-clear signals from this sector, Corliss smiled thinly. We have at least 45 minutes before anyone realizes St. Jude has gone dark. I only need 10. He tapped his earpiece. Miller, report. Static. Corliss frowned. Miller, report. North Wing status. More static. He gestured to a heavily tattooed mercenary by the door. Ryan, go check on Miller. He's probably fumbling with a locked door, but I don't want loose ends. Ryan nodded, racked his bolt, and stepped into the amber-lit hallway. 2 corridors away, Sarah was moving like a shadow. She had stripped off her teal scrub top, wearing only a dark gray undershirt that blended with the dim emergency lighting. She moved barefoot, rubber-soled clogs, discarded. Bare feet on linoleum made zero noise and let her feel the vibration of heavy combat boots approaching. She felt it before she heard it. A rhythmic thud-thud-thud through the floorboards. Someone coming. Sarah slipped into a utility closet, leaving the door cracked a fraction of an inch. Through the sliver of space, she watched Ryan advance, slicing the pie around corners, rifle up, moving tactically. He was good, but he was looking for a scared doctor or a fleeing patient, not a predator. As Ryan passed the utility closet, his gaze sweeping the long, empty hallway ahead, Sarah pushed the door open. No sound. She didn't shoot him. A suppressed shot still makes a distinct mechanical cycling noise that a trained ear catches in a quiet building. Instead, she stepped up directly behind him. Her left arm snaked around his throat, the crook of her elbow locking over his windpipe. Simultaneously, her right hand drove the pommel of the K-bar hard into his kidney. The pain forced his mouth open in a silent scream, lungs emptied, the choke instantly effective. Ryan thrashed wildly, dropping his rifle. Sarah had already dragged him backward into the closet's darkness. She hooked her leg around his, stripped his balance, and brought them both to the floor. She held the choke with terrifying, emotionless strength. 7 seconds. Ryan went limp. She bound his hands and feet with zip ties from a supply cart, stuffed a sterile gauze roll into his mouth, and sealed it with medical tape. She picked up his radio. Ryan, did you find Miller? Corliss's voice, impatience bleeding through the ice. Sarah pressed transmit. This time, she didn't just click. She let silence hang over the open mic. 3 full seconds, letting the ambient sounds of the hospital breathe into it. The drip of a leaky pipe. The hum of the air vents. Then she spoke. A low, chilling whisper, completely devoid of panic. Ryan's indisposed. Miller's taking a nap. Up in the VIP suite, Corliss froze. The men around him exchanged nervous glances. Who is this? He demanded, hand tightening on his weapon. Identify yourself. I'm the graveyard shift, Sarah whispered. And you're making too much noise in my ward. She cut the transmission. Corliss stared at his radio. His jaw clenched. This wasn't a panicked civilian. The cadence, the breath control, the absolute absence of fear in that voice. He recognized it instantly. 10 years in special operations leaves a mark on what a professional killer sounds like. Change frequencies, he ordered, voice dropping an octave. Channel 4. Now. He looked at the two men remaining with him. We have a problem. Someone is hunting us. One person, scoffed a merc named Jax. Against 12 of us? Let me go find them. It's not just one person, it's a professional, Corliss snapped. They took down Miller and Ryan without a single sound. No gunshots, no distress calls,